Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Top Agent Nation Commercial Wednesdays. This is Show Me the Money. Really, really important in this new time of transformation. As we know, we've gotten experts in the US, around the world. So many changes are happening with AI. As I'm traveling, having meetings with executives, leaderships, portfolio managers on the West Coast. I always call Todd, knowing everyone on the East Coast, probably everywhere, but with AI, there's really that window. And for those that don't really see it, you really need to explore your own branding and AI and what can you do. A lot of us are having discussions about not so much us, because those that have gray hair, no hair, dyed hair, we still have reputation. With our reputation, you can actually build and use it, right? But the younger generation, the generation who are just now in college or graduating, the question was put to me, what do you do? What can I plug into? How do I make a living? And a lot of things that we're trying to share and hopefully tell everyone is equity. Everyone needs money. Everyone needs financing. Everyone needs to put it together. So with this time of AI, everyone has ideas. I'll tell you, everyone is programming and building AI something. Todd, I'd love to give you credit about the one-person billion-dollar company. Who knows? Maybe, I think you already told me they already created $100 million company, but maybe get to the billion to a trillion. You'd never know with AI. And for those that watch TikTok and watching these robots do martial arts, I mean, it's just amazing. It's a matter of time. So with this group, and thank you for attending and listening, the urgency I'm really pushing to everyone is build your brand with social media, learn AI like you're going back to college, trying to get into that, or high school, trying to get into that elite college, and the network, right? The group that you need to plug in to leverage each other. Because one thing I did tell one of my friends that runs a very large company, he goes, my child just got laid off, or my child's in college, what do they do? And a lot of times people said it is the soft skill. It is the relationship building, the network that you create, things that AI can't do right now is something that everyone needs to start thinking of. And I just stress the urgency. But I want to introduce our guest because Show Me the Money is so important at this time, because money still runs everything. If you have access to capital or how to structure debt, you're invaluable. Many people are always looking for money, right? How many times have people raised saying, and I see Sherry driving, be careful, Sherry, money, money, money. Everyone wants money, right? Because that's how it runs these businesses, or especially AI. They still need money. Granted, they can do things cheaper, faster, better, but they still need money to get it off the ground. So we're going to get started. Todd will be sharing a lot on the equity, a little bit of what he built. And I'm tying this in, Todd, with your private equity group. I gave you a couple bucks. I love what you're building. Alan Wu's been around forever, since the fix and flip days, constantly building Sequoia Enterprises, right? Used to just be Sequoia Lending, but it's gone beyond that. So I'll first start on the debt side. Alan, if you don't mind sharing, and we're going to go deeper into this, on explaining the debt and the finance part. Please, Alan.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, James, for setting this thing up for all of us. And definitely, just like you said, AI, it's here. It's not the talk anymore. It is actually here. It's actually here to say. So definitely, there's a lot of change going on out there. As we doing a lot of lending, we used to lend a lot of commercial, for example, like a lot of construction. We're funding a lot of projects such as building multifamilies, building retail, so on and so forth. But recently, especially toward the end of last year and especially beginning of this year, we have many clients came to us looking for funding for building data center, purchasing land for data centers. So again, it tells us that that is the way to go. And just like James said, there are a lot of company out there laying off people, but they are just laying off people. Just remember, people are still there, right? They still have to find a ways to go. Either they will go out there to look for another job, or it forces them to create their own business and to get into the entrepreneurship. So the way that I see it is there's always two sides of the coin, right? So we also see a lot of individuals, even though they have a job right now, but they're coming out.
你先等我一下好了，好不好？ OK， 好，9:05正式开始，我先讲个1分钟就好。
Alejandro, can you mute them? Thank you.
Yeah. So they are coming out to not having a full-time job at the same time they are starting up their own business, whether it's in the AI or IT, whatever that might be. So we are actually in I hate to say this, but we are actually in a very good position as a commercial lender, meaning that many things happening out there. The entrepreneurship, a lot of people open up their own business. They need funding for it. Now, quite frankly, the money just does not fall on trees, right? They need to get themselves ready to get the funding. And so that's one thing that we are teaching our clients to do, to get themselves ready, capital readiness. Also, at the same time, a lot of foreigners are moving into the United States just because of the tariff. Hey, it doesn't matter what size of the aisle that you're sitting in. What we are seeing right here is that there are a lot of foreign companies coming to the United States, setting up warehouses, purchasing properties, setting up factories, so on and so forth. So they do need funding. And I believe in this core group right here, we are all commercial real estate brokers. And we have been funding commercial projects since 2006. So here in Sequoia, that's the only thing that we don't do is primary residence. Okay, so other than that, pretty much anything that involved with business, we are able to, if the project makes sense, most likely we should be able to find a place for it or find some sort of funding sources for it. So currently we have over 500 different funding sources that we have been work with in the past and vetted in the past. We are nationwide. It does not matter what it is. As long as they are in the United States, in the 50 states of the United States, and the project makes sense, most likely we are able to find the funding that they need. So let's dive in a little bit about what we actually can do. Obviously, I only have about 10-15 minutes right here. I can give everybody an overview of what our shop can do. We can definitely talk about in more detail of each product in some other times. So when you come into commercial funding, there are actually two main categories if you're sitting on a 3,000 level. The first category has anything to do with commercial real estate, such as 1 to 4 unit investment property. I was just talking to Todd not long ago that, hey, the interest rate has dropped. I'm not sure if you pay attention to it. Last year at this time, if you came to me, you're asking for interest rate to purchasing a single family home for investment purpose, not for primary residence. Okay, for investment purpose, your interest rate is somewhere around 8%. Okay, if you remember correctly, last year around this time frame. But today we start at 5.99 across the board, 5.99, and we are quoting anywhere between 6.25 to 7%, low 6 to low 7, somewhere around there, between the leverage, between the credit score, between the property, so on and so forth. So we do a lot of 1 to 4 unit investment property across the country, and also in some particular markets. We also now seeing a lot of multifamily. Many of these, we also know a single family home is not selling as quickly as possible, so that forces a lot of investors look somewhere else. So instead of still looking for 1 to 4 unit investment property, Airbnb, short-term rental, whatever that might be, now we see quite a bit of them moving into multifamily, 5 unit and above, whether it's a purchase, value add, or refinance, cash out, whatever that might be. So we seeing quite a bit of those. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the lender also open up their doors for multifamily. Again, last year, somewhere around mid of last year, a lot of the lenders are backing away from multifamily just because of uncertainties, just because of local market, whatever that might be. But now many lenders are stepping in back into multifamily, and even some of the lenders before, they were not in the multifamily, and now they also want to get into the multifamily as well. So that is something that we can definitely do. Mixed use, we all know what that is. On the ground level, it's commercial use, and then on the top level are residential use. We see a lot of business owners that they used to rent, restaurant owners, medical office. They used to rent a space, and now they're able to come out here to purchase buildings like this. Of course, commercial properties, that has a lot to do with hardcore commercial, such as retails, shopping malls, office buildings, parking lots, you name it. So, and constructions, right? So those are all the different type of product and services that we can do. Not to mention about fix and flip. That is, it's there forever. It's still going very strong. Whatever the economy looks like, fix and flip is a business on its own, and people are still out there funding businesses. And we even have funding program that if you're an experienced fix and flipper, we can fund you 100% of the purchase price and 100% of the renovation budget. And in some cases, we will even able to roll in your interest into the loan. So basically, you don't, as an experienced fix and flipper, you don't need to fund up with anything. I mean, pretty much, we would just give you a loan and you pay everything back at the end. So there's a lot of program out there. Last but not least, nonprofit. Yes, we do fund churches, temples, nonprofit organizations in a limited space. But so the first category is the commercial real estate. So those are the things that we can offer. Now, the second big category is definitely the business funding that has nothing to do with real estate. For example, working capitals. You have a restaurant already. You want to open up another one. You want to renovate the building. You do equipment. We funded a lot of restaurants. Nowadays, they are not, when they open up a new location, well, when they want to expand their business, they don't just want to open up a location. They actually, a lot of them purchasing food trucks instead of committed themselves into one location. Now they're purchasing food trucks that they can actually drive around. We can offer term loans. We can even offer AR financing. A lot of the business out there that they provide service to big corporations or provide service and products to companies such as Walmart, Amazon, whatever that might be, and they cannot wait for 30 days, 45 days, 60 days for their invoice to get paid. So we do a lot of factoring on ourselves also. Of course, we also do a business acquisitions. We see medical company out there purchasing out of medical companies. Other businesses acquiring other businesses. So again, those are something that we can do also. So those are the two main categories of commercial funding here in Sequoia Enterprise Solution that we can offer to our clients. And of course, besides of the funding, just like Jim says, we actually expand our business to other product and solutions as well. And I don't want to, bore you with all the different services that we offer. But one thing that I like to point out is something we just launched a new program called Property Restoration for Insurance Claim. As we know, a lot of business owners, they own real estates. Many of these real estates will get damaged sooner or later by natural disaster, wind damage, fire damage, water damage, whatever that might be. And many of them, quite frankly, they do not know how to claim insurance on their own, even though they call the insurance company on themselves. But I bet you a lot of the insurance company will do whatever it takes to minimize their claim. But however, by partnering up with us, and we can offer solutions for them to help them to claim insurance professionally, and to get as much dollar as they are entitled to get. So those are all the different product and services that we in here in Sequoia Enterprise Solution that we offer. So again, if you have any scenarios or whatsoever, feel free to reach out to us. Just like the name say, Enterprise Solution, we provide solutions for our business owners. So whatever the project, whatever the scenario might be, give us a call. Most likely we will be able to find you something or find you the funding that you need for your business. So I believe my 20 minutes is up. So James, back to you.
Alan, thank you. I did take up some of your time. Can you share a little Sequoia also? Because I always value everyone's time, but give everyone a little plug on their business and how they can get involved with you too.
Yes, absolutely. Sequoia, it's a platform. If you know about EXP, we are actually very similar to EXP, where we recruit agents onto our platform. And one thing, good thing about commercial funding is that number one, there's no licensing needed on our side of the world. Okay, so that's why we can do business in all 50 states. And we realize that a lot of us real estate agents, loan officers, insurance agents, or CPAs, or whatever professional that you might be in, you already have a book of business. And quite frankly, a lot of your clients are most likely already in the business, and they do need product and services or funding what Sequoia can offer. So instead of asking you to give us a referral like any other business do, we actually ask you to, hey, why don't you join our platform, join our team and become one of our affiliate, bring in your client, you still deal with your client, and we have advisors behind the scene that will deal with the lender, and together we will make this thing, we'll make a deal work, and we will fund this deal together. And quite frankly, we can pay you commissions or consulting fee, however you want to call it, just because of the nature of our business. So if you're interested for more for that, you can look into the the link right here, jameshuang.sexsolution.com, or give us a call. We will more than happy to run you through what this platform is all about.
Alan, thank
James?
you. And the debt matters so much. And also finding other ways to make income. I know it's been very difficult during since COVID, and it just transitioned where everyone is looking for other ways to make income, passive income, sometimes non-commission income that you can earn some fees, because a lot of times the transaction, because of the interest rates were so high, people were obviously still looking at deals and hoping they could knock the price down, or maybe having some secret sauce to increase the income or do some magic, right? Yeah, everyone knows cost seg, this, that, different ways of finding better capital stack, which is what we're discussing, to be and use the capital more efficiently to other service providers, that then you can figure out how to decrease your expenses, increase your income. And there's a lot of different ways where I know some people are there with us. I would say the billboards before, they were all static, then dynamic. Clear Channel started buying everyone up. Then later on, wireless came into the mix. Wireless, everyone started buying the wireless towers. I'm sure, Todd, you probably rolled up some private equity deals on that. Everyone was buying all the wireless towers so they could enhance wireless, since everyone knew the infrastructure doing fiber optics was very expensive. You got to get all these zoning, but wireless, right? It just goes in the air. And now it's EV chargers, right? EV chargers, you don't need so much parking spots. Everyone's talking about EV chargers. But one thing we hope in our group is to share these tips so you can plug in, you can maximize your income from many different directions. But the biggest one is controlling your expenses and seeing how you can actually improve your NOI so you can sell a property, or better yet, buyers are liars, right? We always say that. To tell your buyers how you can run their property more efficiently so they will buy the property, hoping, right? And Todd can kind of go in this, interest rates will start coming down. So by the time you buy the property makes sense, interest rates come down, you run the property more efficiently, your NOI goes up, the valuation goes up, everyone's happy, and then hopefully you get another commission in a couple of years, they want to sell the property. But Todd, having your background, and please share your background. I love your background more than anything. It's the greatest story, and still giving back. But on the equity side, right? Why is equity kind of so important? But if you don't mind sharing your background, and then really talking about show me the money, the equity, right? Everyone needs the equity, top of the stack. Todd?
Awesome. Well, great. Thanks for the intro, Jim, and always a pleasure to speak to the group. What I will start out and share is, I came from South Central Los Angeles, and have been so blessed to be where I'm at today, and so I know many of you may have seen some of this, but I will share my screen and share a little bit of my background, and then we can talk through raising equity specifically. So as you look here, and I'm just pulling from an old presentation that I use for my capital raising blueprint course. But I've done 8 funds, about 1.3 billion, all in real estate and mortgages. I was really fortunate to attend both Johns Hopkins and Stanford. Worked at some of the largest and biggest banks and investment institutions that trained me, but really came from those humble beginnings that I told you about. And that's a picture of me, my mom, my dad. I wrote 232, which was what my parents paid in rent. And so I share all this because I just want people to know that anyone can really do this. And the more we educate ourselves and have the right mentors, the more we're going to be able to get to where we want to go. This top left corner is where I grew up. That's the apartment, 1340 West 57th Street. I was really blessed to get a scholarship to go to a school down in Palos Verdes called Chadwick School. It was a little over a 2-hour ride just on the bus to get down there every day and back. But that changed my life, and so just really excited to just share this with you guys. And if I can ever be of a resource to anyone, please don't hesitate to reach out. So So today, we're going to talk about, structuring capital, and so I built this little site this morning just because I thought it might be a little easier to walk through, and I also have a presentation that I'll share. So equity versus debt, the key to smarter real estate deals. So, this is just mainly about understanding the capital stack. And I think Jim said it best, debt funds deals, but equity really builds wealth. And I think, understanding how to structure and raise equity becomes probably the most critical thing for you as a sponsor in a deal. And that equity can come from many different sources: high net worth individuals, joint ventures, private equity, family offices, can come from institutional investors. But I found my greatest success for equity from high net worth individuals, and I think that has always been, at least for me, the easiest. And I prefer getting to yeses as quickly as possible, or nos as quickly as possible, versus when I was going after institutional clients, it just seemed like you were in this long cycle that may take 12, 18 months or longer sometimes just to get to a no. And for me, that was just very difficult to deal with. And there are people that are extremely successful, and I think once you get your break in the door, it probably opens up a lot more capital than I've been able to raise. But I've really enjoyed working with the high net worth individual investors. And so let's let me see. Give me one second. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second and pull up a presentation. I don't want to get you guys dizzy while I bring that up. All right, there we go. All right. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. And let's see here. So the picture didn't load here. Sorry about that. So, obviously we know uh, debt is giving us leverage, and leverage is a double-edged sword, as we all know here. I mean, if you've been through any market cycles, uh, leverage is the piece that either helps really magnify your success or magnify your failure. I think the reason people go and use debt is pretty obvious. But I think one of the things that I've learned in structuring deals is making sure that you have sufficient equity and or equity capital partners that can weather a storm, because many times people are scraping by to get those deals done, and they may be priced to perfection. And I think that's where you find yourself in trouble, because none of us really know what's going to happen. As much as we can all be students of the markets, have a lot of wisdom, the one thing I've learned, is that I never really know what's going to happen. When COVID hit, I thought the market was going to crash. I mean, the economy was in shambles. Nobody was doing any business, and so I started ramping up my capital raising efforts for my ninth distressed fund. And the fact of the matter is that opportunity never really came. The government printed tons and tons of money, and the people that made money were not the people who were looking to buy distress. It was the people who had assets, were able to continue to hold on to those assets, and they saw interest rates just fall to the floor, and the market did the complete opposite of what I thought the market was going to do. And so I think it's important, because that's a good example where on one end, the market should have, quote unquote, tanked, but it didn't. And conversely, we've been in situations where, Bitcoin, as an example, going to a million, and, got to what, 125,000, is down 50%, right? And so, the fact is, if you were leveraged Bitcoin, you probably look like a hero over the last, year or so, 2 years. But over the last couple of months, you're probably hurting pretty bad. And so I think having that strategic balance between debt and equity is really important, because it at least allows you to hold on if the market goes against you. So, going through, one thing I'm going to go through is just deconstructing the capital stack, how it's priced, how you raise equity, and then some next steps. So high level here, senior debt, we all know, is at the bottom. It's the lowest risk. It gives the lowest return, but it has the most safety. And that's what most banks want to be, where they want to be. Mezzanine debt is kind of like that gap in financing where it's more expensive than senior debt, subordinate to the senior debt, but it still is really debt. And then the next step is preferred equity. And I feel like these can sometimes get very confusing, when it comes to mez and pref. But just understand equity is truly equity, and the fact that, if things don't go well, these investors are typically more in the position to either take over the project, or take over the investment than maybe a mez debt investor would. And the cost of capital is going to be higher, but you also have less risk from the standpoint of default, meaning, not that you wouldn't lose your project, but at least you're not necessarily dealing with lawsuits around non-payment. So you have preferred equity there, and then finally common equity, and this is the highest risk with the greatest upside. And if you've ever been a sponsor, that's what you own. And raising this is probably the most critical piece of this whole story. And I've seen many people kind of structure debt around deals. They have all of that ready to go, but the one thing they really lack the most of is common equity. And so I really want to talk through some of that today. Senior debt, secured by first lien, typically 55 to 75%, depending on the asset quality. It's typically provided by commercial banks, life insurance companies, and the CMBS market. Mezzanine debt, it's that gap filler, which I talked about. It's typically going to be priced in that 12 to 18% um, uh, place, and it may, one thing that's interesting is many times it may be restricted by senior lenders, where your senior lender does not want any mezzanine debt on there, so it may not even be an option. And when it's not an option, that's where people have to go towards preferred equity or have to raise more common equity. They do have the right to foreclose on the equity ownership, but not the asset. So understand, you have the company, you have the asset, and typically in that structure, they don't have the position of foreclosing on the asset, just the company. So that's when you'll typically see a lot of UCC filings. Equity layer, this would be your preferred equity, or preferred equity, where it's going to sit in the equity portion of the capital stack. It's senior to the common equity, so they get paid out their distributions before common. They don't have foreclosure rights, which is probably the key difference between mezzanine debt and preferred equity. Typical returns, I haven't seen anything as low as 13%, to be quite frank. But I'd say, probably in that, 20%, 18 to 20% is probably a very realistic number these days. Maybe as the market heats up, and or if you have less senior debt, maybe you'll get lower preferred equity. But for the most part, you're probably going to be looking in that 18% kind of number to even be in the game around preferred equity, in my experience. Now, markets matter, so I would assume if you're in certain markets where it's very dense and people feel safer, you may get lower numbers there. And this is usually accepted by senior lenders. So just understand that mezzanine is probably one of the hardest ones to do, just because if you have senior debt, they usually are going to forbid you from having that. Common equity, this the 7% here is really more, I'll say, something related to if you were going to be funding a deal all cash without any debt. But typically, if you're going to have debt in your structure, you're looking at 20% plus for equity like returns, or for equity capital that want to come into your deal. And then spreads, I want to kind of talk through this. The main markets or baseline is going to either be based off your 10-year treasury or SOFR, secured overnight financing rate, and you're going to have a spread over that index, and so that'll be the thing that I would say you really want to get familiar with as you are looking in this space, and just understand that that spreads, I think have actually been tightening recently, which is good. I think Alan talked about that. So as financing is getting more affordable lately, but we still haven't seen a ton of transactions just yet. But I think people are getting a little bit more excited than they have over the last few years. What are those spreads? Multifamily, industrial, office. Obviously, office is probably one of the most difficult today. People are really struggling with where to put office, how to reposition it. I think that's going to continue to be a challenge going forward. I think industrial has probably been it's been probably the highlight in many markets that I've seen, where people are just very interested in industrial, as you just have more and more of the Amazon type businesses, and people getting things from home and not necessarily going into retail or going into office. And so I think that's pretty telling. I think we talked about this already in terms of mezz debt versus preferred equity. They're very similar to in terms of the overall return that investors are looking for. Maybe a couple percent premium, maybe 200 basis point premium over mezz debt. And then, I think the other side is just really looking at, when people talk about these numbers, where are you in the capital stack? And many times as we're talking about brand new transactions, or highly levered transactions. But, I think, it's not surprising that as you have less leverage, your overall, risk is going to be much lower, but it also means you're going to have much lower overall returns. And so I think that's one of the hardest things for capital raisers to really tell the story, because I think we all think people want high returns, and on one hand they do. But what I found as I've worked with some of the wealthiest families is that you need to figure out what bucket you're in for their capital, meaning, but it's the same whether it's an institution or a family office or a high net worth individual, but really making sure, hey, am I in their opportunistic bucket? Which you'll probably, let's just say someone has $100 million to allocate. Well, they may allocate 5 to 10 million, 5 to 10% into something opportunistic. But if it's something that's core, maybe out of that 100 million, they may allocate 50, 60, 70% of their money into that. And so the one thing that I found was, as you actually go down the yield curve, meaning go down the return targets, you can typically raise more capital than you can when you go towards the highest leverage deals. And case in point, one of my clients, we were generating, anywhere from 25 to 98% returns in our funds. And as I found out, and they had allocated, maybe 10, 20 million or so into a few of our funds. And as I got to know them better, I realized that they literally had hundreds of millions of dollars in assets that were returning 3%. Right. And it's like, so on one hand, you think people want those super high returns, and we all focus, and many times being in real estate, like my client I got to show them the juicy deals. You know what a juicy deal for that big money was? It was owning a whole strip of retail on St. Catharines Street in Montreal, and the main tenant was the Apple store, right? Like, and they were earning 3%. But guess what? Apple has how many billions of dollars sitting in cash? They're probably safer than the U.S. Treasury in terms of their ability to repay their debt, right? And so, just know that high risk deals are not necessarily what people are looking for. And you may find like, hey, that deal that seems very bland and boring and not interesting is a deal that you can come in and help either sell or be a part of and or do and raise capital much easier than the 20% plus deal. So that was something that was really interesting. In fact, for our eighth fund, we started doing brand newly originated loans versus non-performing loans. And we ran ads on Facebook. Mind you, this was 2015. So, Instagram, I don't even know if that was out yet or as popular, but we ran it on Facebook. And what we did was we ran the exact same ad as you would in an A/B test, and we ran it from 3% all the way up to 15%. So 3%, 4%, all the way up to 15%. Nothing changed on the ad. The ad was exactly the same, except the number that was on there. And what was really surprising to us is once you went past 10%, the click-through rates fell to the floor. And we don't know exactly why because we didn't do additional research to try to talk to people. But the assumption is people don't believe that you're going to get those higher returns, right? It's like, hey, I believe you can get 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%, but you start talking that you're going to get me 15%. Like now people may be a lot more concerned. Mind you, the market was different at the time. I mean, I think interest rates were much lower, but nonetheless, it was just a case in point that people are very skeptical of high returns, and you almost have an uphill battle. It's almost think of it like this: if someone said, you know, come invest in a McDonald's with me, right? McDonald's just feels very safe, right? I mean, we see all the stuff around healthy choices and food, and yet McDonald's is still plugging away. They're still one of the best franchises around, and and so people feel very safe in these types of investments, and so just don't always go for the high return deals. So raising capital, how do you actually do it? We kind of talked about the capital stack, how it's priced, but let's say now you need to raise the equity, or you have a client that needs to raise the equity. And I think that's one of the things that I realized as being in this business is like I was doing a lot of lending, but I found many of my clients did not know how to raise equity. They were typically kind of scrapping last minute, trying to put money together, but they didn't really have a true plan. And many times it was just built around a syndication. And so I wanted to help them start to do that. And so, what are those three components that are important? Number one, identifying sources. So, are you going after, individuals? Are you going after institutions? Are you going after family offices? Like really knowing that, and then follow a proven process. There's somebody out there who has done successfully what you're trying to do, and you're just wasting time if you don't find a mentor. I think that's one of the powers of what Jim is building with Renaissance is we have an elite network of people who have probably done something that you want to do. And for you not to reach out and leverage this network would be just foolish, to be quite frank. And so, and then finally, just building repeatable systems. So that can range from, personal networks. I didn't have a personal network that I could go to get a ton of money based on where I grew up, but some of us have been fortunate. And one thing I find, especially as a professional, and at the risk of sounding politically incorrect as a man, it's like you don't want to ask for help, and like it's almost like you want to go make it, you want to make your success, and then you want to go back to your friends and your family and say, look what I did, versus going to your friends and family and saying, hey, this is what I'm doing, will you invest with me? And so depending on where you're at, I would really encourage you to just start with your personal networks. Sometimes it can be very, very difficult, but it will probably at least give you practice to a lot of people who likely say no, and get used to hearing no's, and people who are just skeptical, in terms of anything that you're doing. And fortunately, maybe you may be fortunate enough to get a few people that actually do say yes. But I do think, before you go out to institutional sources, start somewhere where you can practice, even if it's like, hey, Jim, can I run my presentation by you? Todd, can I run my presentation by you? Alan, can I run my presentation by you? like get the reps in, because you need to hear those hard questions and you want to be prepared. I would encourage all of you to watch episodes of Shark Tank, because the people who know their numbers and know how to get through their pitch very succinctly are the ones who ultimately raise capital. It's not the ones who are so in love with their product that they forget the most important thing is people want a return on their investment, right? And that's really important. So institutional sources, we've talked about that, family offices, private equity funds, pension funds, and endowment. There's a ton of money here in so many strategies, and I would be very careful. Like, people see this and they say, I'm going after all of it. I think it's almost impossible to go after all of it. I think you need to find your niche and say, I'm going to go after one of these things, and let that be your anchor. The other money will start to follow you and you'll find opportunities. But I know people who only focus on family offices, and they can be extremely successful. It's like one step up from ultra high net worth individuals, and it allows you to like really start building relationships. And the thing I have found going to many of these conferences is that you have to be willing to put the time in and build those relationships for at least 12 months. Don't expect to go in there and people are going to give you money when you're brand new to the group, right? It's just foolish. And unless you just happen to have some amazing startup like Uber or whatever, I just think it's going to be a very, long road, and just be prepared for that. Private equity funds, these guys, I'll be frank, we're sharks. Like, we're looking for good, juicy deals. And when people need capital, maybe I have one deal where you kind of need the capital, but there are people who are like stressed, and those are the ones I like. It's like, hey, they need the money and they're gonna have to accept these terms, or they're probably gonna lose their project, right? Like, those are, it doesn't sound pretty to say, but those are the deals that private equity funds are many times looking for. So just be prepared that if you start going down a private equity fund route, unless you're kind of a branch of their capital raising efforts, like you're a strategy, if you're going to raise money from them, it's going to be, a very vicious world there. And then pension funds and endowments, I think you can get amazing money from these areas, life insurance companies included, but it's a relationships game. It's very hard, very long cycles, doing long presentations, that you're going to be in months and months of due diligence, probably just to get a no. Understand that many of these companies are going to look at thousands of investments to pick one. And so just know the numbers are not on your side. I would say, once again, just like every job I've gotten, it's all come through connections. I would argue that many times, getting allocations are going to come through connections. And so, what I've seen that has been successful is if you can land, many times one big company and they can be your anchor. Many times they'll even say, hey, we'll come in with X amount, 20 million of equity, but you need to find one or two other groups that are also going to come in. So they usually don't want to be the only one into your company or your fund. You have these platforms, real estate crowd funding platforms, syndication platforms, and then opportunity funds. So there may be specific funds that are really geared towards your market, your strategy. There's probably a lot of opportunity there, where they just need deals, right? And you may be more of a deal source for them, and you can carve out some form of JV or GP economics. A repeatable framework here. I think this is the thing that most people miss, right? It's like you have your deal, or have a set of deals, your business, but you just haven't come up with a framework to have consistent success. So it's like, hey, define your capital requirements. I remember the best lesson I learned was from one of my investors. His name is Gabby. And, I was excited about this opportunity. I started rambling about the opportunity, how much money we make, blah, blah, blah. And he just said, Todd, slow down. How much money do you need? How long do you need it? And when will I get it? And how much will I get back? How much do you need? How long do you need it for? And how much will I get back? Answer those three questions. If you can't answer those three questions quickly and easily, then you're just not there yet. get those questions down or those answers down to those questions. And that's going to help you tremendously, because people don't really care about your project or your business or whatever it is as much as you think they do. They have money and they want to get a return on that investment. And you need to be able to answer those questions quickly. Build a financial plan. I think we all know this, but realistic assumptions is really the key. Downside scenarios, like be the one that you've already done, and you're going down what happens if things don't go well, right? Because everyone goes in with rosy glasses. Your investors are naturally going to think about the bad, the risk, and most people raising capital don't really show that. And I would say that will just set you apart from 90% of the presentations they see out of the box. Structure the deal. Make sure you're aligning incentives through fair terms that work for both you and your investors. And so I'll say there's two camps here. I think on the institutional side, you kind of have people who know what deals should be priced at. And then you have high net worth investors who don't necessarily know where deals should be priced at. And depending who you're talking to, I found that, with institutions, you can go in with clear expectations around what fair is. With high net worth investors, people just always want to feel like they got a deal, is my experience. And so even though I may say, what I think is fair is for you to get, 18 to 22%, return. Um, but the investor wants something better. Let's take maybe something simpler that's not equity. Let's just say it was like a debt, to your company or what have you, from a high net worth. So not your senior debt, but it's like a not preferred equity, but debt, but not against the company. So not against the asset. A client may say, or you may think what's fair is 12%. But the client wants to feel like they negotiated a deal. So I found with high net worth investors, especially ultra high net worth investors, you kind of have to price against them so people can still come to fair in the end. Because when you try to start with fair, from my experience, you end up not getting the fair end of the deal for yourself. So I may say, hey, we're pricing this round at, 9%, knowing that I should land at 12%. But by the time the client negotiates to 12%, we're both happy, right? Whereas with institutions who are in the market day to day, they know where the market is, so you don't have to play that psychological game. This should go without saying, but engaging investors, a compelling pitch with professional materials backed by a track record and credibility. I can't tell you how many times I've seen, people put together some really bad materials. It just like, I mean, I saw one for, I won't name the building, but like some building in Miami that was based on, I know they have like the Porsche design or Porsche building, but now they have these other cars, like, I won't need Italian car or German car companies kind of branding the building. And the presentation I saw was just so bad. It was just like you literally screenshot a picture of the logo and you put in your presentation. And even if everything else is good, it just doesn't come across as like professional or that you were even associated with that brand at all. And so just be very mindful. Have someone go over your presentation that has experience, because there may be things that you just don't see that may look good to you and may look good to the people in your circle. But as soon as you put it out into the public to people who see lots and lots of presentations, it can open that up. And then this is I hate to start with this because people get stuck in compliance and they work on things without getting anywhere for a long period of time. But you do need to be very compliant. Legal counsel, regulatory adherence, which is really to protect you and your investors. So just make sure that in the end, this is probably the most important thing on this whole thing. But most people unfortunately start with compliance and they go to attorneys and rack up bills. And my strategy in this is not to do that. We start with the other things first. I have a lot here. I will give you a small little plug, which is, I have a program called the Capital Raising Blueprint, and it's a comprehensive system for people who are serious about building repeatable capital raising, just like through a process. And so if you're interested in learning more, I'll leave a QR code here in the end. And just a few things to remember. The capital stack has these distinct layers, which we talked about: senior debt, mezz debt, preferred equity, and common equity. Pricing obviously goes up as you want equity, typically 20% plus type returns, unless you're going to be, fully funded with equity without any debt or very low leverage. You're going to see equity probably be in the 20% plus range. And then successful capital raising requires more than relationships. It demands a systematic process, professional reputation, and or presentation, and transparent communication. So I see some questions here. I'll throw this out to the group if this spawns any discussion. What challenges are you facing with capital raising for your deals? And here's a QR codes, that feel free to take a screenshot, both of my capital raising blueprint, or if you just want to connect with me and save my contact information. So thanks, Jim. I see, Max, you have a question, and we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, Todd, would you please explain the exact return? When you talk about return, can you be more specific as to what you're talking about?
Return, you mean for investors specifically, or return? Yeah. So remember, there's two things when you think about return on a project. There's really kind of what I'll call the actual return on investment if the deal was fully funded with cash, right? So I'd start there, right? Because everything else that what we're talking about today with Alan and with myself is financial engineering.
Yeah.
Right. We're just building our own capital stack to increase the leverage. The easiest scenario would be, what's the return if I bought $1 million house in Miami and I wanted to rent it out? I'm probably going to get 2 to 3% on my money. That's the real return, right? It just, the rent that's going to cover if I use all cash, that's what it is. How can I now get that to 5 or 6% return? It's because I can go out and I can leverage that asset with debt, right? And so, obviously that's probably not the best scenario if that was a 2%, because you're gonna not make money. But the idea here is, you have to start with your cash on cash return, and that will give you the best way to look at a deal, and then from there start building in this financial engineering component. And I think, unfortunately, people start with, finance, and I think that's a huge mistake, because just once you have money, and I don't put myself in that crowd, because I've worked with extremely wealthy people, but people who can just go buy a whole, hotel, or buy a whole block of a city street. Like, when you can go buy that cash, you look at the world completely different. Most of us as service providers, we look at the world through a transaction-based lens, which is like, okay, we earn commissions, whether it's for selling the property, buying the property, doing the debt. And so all of that makes a lot of sense, and many clients will still use these services to get their transactions done. But at the core, like when we got into non-performing loans, like we were buying these things just with our cash. There was no leverage, right? It's like, what do we get cash on cash return? And I would say start there, and that really drives everything else. And it'll also help you not waste time doing things that aren't going to be practical, right? So if the deal is not attractive in a cash on cash, kind of scenario, it's going to be very hard to make that deal attractive with financing. And that's probably the easiest way to look at it. And this will also give people the best understanding of where returns truly are. So, if you go and you look at maybe, buying a piece of real estate in, Manhattan, that's a multifamily building with cash, compared to buying a multifamily building with cash in a market like Atlanta, right? You're going to see off the bat the difference. And why is it different? Well, there's more people in Manhattan than there is in Atlanta. The average income is higher in Manhattan than it is in Atlanta. Like, it'll force you to understand those core demographics before you get into like all of this deal structuring. And I think that's a huge mistake that many of us make, is we're putting the financial engineering ahead of the actual economics of the deal if it was just funded with cash. I hope that answers your question.
Yes,
But if
yes.
not, yeah.
No,
Todd,
perfect.
and thank you for
Thank
this.
you.
Yeah, and Alan, because one thing most agents should know is the finance, the stack, how does it work? But also, how does the equity people look at it? And it's true, as you get bigger, they don't play games, they know what cap rate, they know the metrics on everything. The middle ground, everyone plays around. And I love, Todd, that you shared where everything should fit. This is the language everyone needs to know. So you don't talk to people and we know the ranges are those that are professionals, and they go, oh my gosh, you're speaking out of line. So we know you're either playing games or you're unknowledgeable, but then you're a waste of time. You got to learn. If you're in commercial real estate finance, you better know. And Todd, you're right. And Alan, the people who pitch, they pitch like it's in the back of their head. They just on their hand, they just know the pitch, they know the numbers, but the serious investors, they gotta like you, they gotta trust you. Then they ask those questions, those 3 questions. So we will probably set a side how to go deeper, probably even a course, because financing, debt, how do you leverage? And Todd, you know this. Once you run the equity stack, a lot of times you run, and Alan knows it's a pain sometimes. Once you run the equity, they go, no, I'm using my debt guy because I'm making your ratios work out. So my guy gets the debt, because as agents, debt is probably 1 point. Mezz could be 3 to 5 points. Equity, and we always hear the broker dealer 10 point plus, right, for them to raise capital. And you got to price this capital stack all into the deck. So obviously, as a principal, if you could raise more of your own money, you don't have to have that extra fees. But you have to understand, as Todd was mentioning, and Alan, understanding the return. Because if you put all these numbers in and it doesn't make any sense, go back. And I don't want to say throw it against the wall and do the dummy way of underwriting to give it to the institutionals or serious people, because then you ruined it, right? Because then they know you didn't do your homework, you're just throwing garbage, and they won't take you serious. And Todd, I think it's my friend that's selling in Miami. I'm going to talk to him. But yeah, all the car companies, all the luxury brands, most of my friends are the sellers. I always say all the buildings are worth $1 billion in sales. So I has to be one of my friends, because they run all of them. There's a couple of them. I'm not going to name names. We don't want to get anyone into trouble, but I'm going to reach out to my friends about that company. But I think I know who you're talking about. And this is the thing, everyone. It's a small world. To have Todd and Alan here, reach out, Alan and Todd, please put your information. This is invaluable. To be honest, they may or may not return your call. Be serious. We're friends, relationships. This is why we can do this. Not every time on LinkedIn can you reach out. You got to value everyone's time. Otherwise, it's not that they're disrespectful to you. It's just they're busy. So they have to make time or make sure it's meaningful. So again, Todd, Alan, thank you so much. Please reach out to them. They're a wealth of expert. I use them to ask my questions, because you do have to have a network. Is your net worth and the go-to people, because you can't be the one that knows everything. Then you're in the wrong room, right? We all know that. If you know everything, you're in the wrong room. Find another room. So everyone, thank you for Top Agent Nation Commercial Wednesdays. Please reach out to our guests, to Todd and Alan. They have tremendous ways to teach you and show you, from courses to other ways of making money. But our mission this year is really to help people use meaningful information in context and relationship, so you can start making more money. I don't even want to say survive to 2025 or 26. Gosh, it seems like we're just keep surviving. And now with AI, 2030, man, all of the things is going to change. So everyone, keep showing up, keep connecting with people. Let's all work together, invite guests, because we want to grow our network and we want to build a better community. I know we all are giving people. Thank you, everyone. Have a great Wednesday. See everyone next week.
Thank you.
Thanks.